you love your spouse and you're thankful for them, but we all have that habit of criticizing our significant other from one time or another. My next guest agrees that it's natural for conflict to arise in marriage, but she says if we get too caught up in the criticism, we can create untrue stories about our spouse, and that fosters resentment in that relationship. So we have a relationship coach, Crystal Hansen, joining us here on Studio 5. Thanks for being here, Crystal. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So tell us about this idea that we can create it's almost like we could take a little criticism and create this thought around it or this story around it.
Yes, and typically I've found that the easiest way to notice it is actually the narrative in your head. So when we say things like, oh, I've told my spouse that I really like it if they plan, date night for us on Fridays and they don't do it. And then it's like, oh, well, they must not care. They obviously don't care about our marriage. They don't care about our relationship. And so it kind of just goes down that rabbit hole. Another way that I've seen too is, hey, I tell you I don't like you to share these things, or this is a secret, and you tell somebody, so obviously I can't trust you. And so
I'm guilty of that as the spouse. My husband will say, don't tell anyone. I tell all my siblings.
Yes, and most of the time that partner isn't doing it out of spite or saying, hey, I don't care, or I don't love you. It's just, we do things because.
But why do we do it? Why do we create that narrative?
I think we're human, and so we like to make sense of things. And so our brains just kind of go into problem-solving mode. And as we kind of look at this without awareness or without kind of a brain that is being watched over with awareness or even supervision, it's really easy just to create these stories in our head. We all kind of do that on a daily basis, where we kind of go to worst case scenario.
Tell about how harmful, though, it could be for your relationship if you are doing that.
Yeah, well, it's the biggest problem with that is there's no communication. We've created the story about each other and we haven't even fact-checked it with each other as partners. And so we have this belief system about each other that isn't even true, and it's turning into resentment and turning into less connection with each other.
And the longer you don't talk about it, the more resentful you become in that situation.
And the more you believe it.
Okay, so what can we do when we hear or we feel these thoughts creeping in?
So the first thing that I like to do is when you notice it, and a lot of times, like I said, you'll notice the resentment come up, and then it's like, okay, what is this narrative that I'm telling myself? What am I telling myself about my spouse? Do I really believe it? Is it true? Are these things really true? Really kind of slowing it down and getting a logical brain on it instead of having it be just this, like I said, brain that's just going down almost like a soundtrack or this tape that we just keep replaying.
Would you suggest opening it up to another person to maybe bounce the idea off of? Or, because I could just see, even if you're trying to convince yourself, is this true, you could go back to the same thought process.
Yes, and you can definitely open it up. A lot of times people will go talk to a friend or they'll talk to a family member. The thing is that's great, but then it's still just their narrative too and their perspective. So if you're gonna talk to somebody, the best person to talk to is the point of this problem. So going to the spouse and saying, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking, or this is what I'm making this mean. Is this even true for you? How do you feel about this?
How do you handle the feelings right away when they start to come? I can feel it creeping in when I start to get kind of resentful about something. So how do you kind of stop it right then and handle those feelings?
I am a firm believer that whenever you notice it, if it's in the middle, if it's an hour later, if it's 2 days later, just take a minute and give yourself a little bit of compassion and grace, because this is something that we all do. None of us are perfect at it, but giving yourself space and time to just kind of take a breath and kind of get grounded and then go and have that conversation.
Okay. On the flip side, what if you figure out that it is true? What if you go down all these channels, you really self-evaluate, and you come to the conclusion, no, this is really happening and I am hurt by it. Then where do you go?
Okay, so once you kind of settled down, right? We don't ever want to go into a conversation where we're heated or we're upset, because that's never productive. No one likes to be the attacker or feel attacked in a conversation. So actually just getting yourself to a place where you've taken a breath, taken some space, really decided how you feel about it, and then going and having the conversation with your partner and saying, hey, this is what's going on. This hurts my feelings, or this is how I'm thinking and I'm interpreting this. Like, what are your thoughts and feelings on it? And really have a conversation about it as opposed to a discussion or an argument. think that that's really
And
important.
one point you point out in your discussions is that go positive. You got to go in with a positive attitude, a positive outlook on the situation. Kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, so I think we all know this, right? When we date, we're never looking for evidence that our partner doesn't care or that they don't love us. It's always like, let me look for all the reasons why they're so amazing and wonderful and why we love each other. Over time in marriage, we kind of lose that, right? We get caught up in life and all the things that we're doing, and it's not the main force of our priority. So I like to do what's called give equal airspace. So if you're going to give airspace to this part of like, oh, they don't care, or we're not connecting, or they're not showing up the way I would like them to, try to look for reasons how they are too, so that you really can kind of give both sides.
So would you start with positive first? I love this about you, but I need you to fix this.
Yes. No, I mean, honestly, that really is more of a self-narrative. When at that point, that's when you have that conversation with your spouse, so you can go into it with compassion, where you have looked at the positive. Even though you're feeling these heavy negative feelings, you still have that positive spin, so you can go in with some compassion and love for them. So it really is more of a discussion as a team as opposed to
I love
opposing
that.
sides.
You are a team, absolutely. Okay, Crystal, where can we get more wonderful advice from you?
Oh, you're great. I have a website. It's crystalhansencoaching.com. I'm on Instagram, and I have a podcast that's going to be dropping in a few weeks that's called Couples in Conflict. So watch for that.
Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thanks so much.
Crystal, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.